Alright, so I just wanted to explain some concepts that we're mostly working with here. One concept being the COP concept. So COP stands for coefficient of performance. It was normally used in the heat pump or heat generating industry, where you would have elements and things like that. So you can look that up if you like, but basically it's coefficient of performance. It determines how well a system is working based on the input in compared to the output out. Now you can have a system where you put in very little energy and you get out a lot of energy. A solar panel, for instance, that's a COP greater than 1 type machine or system, where the sun is putting in all the energy. You basically only had to put in energy to create the system, e.g. the solar panel, and you're getting out a lot of energy out. Thermal, radiation, all sorts of different systems use this type of arrangement, where all you have to do is basically set up a system that collects energy and gives you out energy. And usually when you start getting out more energy than you had to put in to set up the system, that's a COP of 2. Now many people get that confused because they think that, well, you have to calculate the energy of the solar panel, of all the materials, of all the things. You have to, not only that you have to put into making it, that all the energy that consists inside of the materials. If you want to look at it that way, sure, but that's not how we are looking at it right now. We're looking at, we build the system. Now sometimes it's free because we scrounge up materials and it's all free. Sometimes we pay for the materials and then we get energy out. Usually we're only calculating the energy input, so we could have a trigger that goes in. All we're paying for is a trigger using a 12 volt or a small voltage, and then we're getting energy out, and over time we're getting more energy out than we're triggering to do that. Earth ground antennas, where you're getting the energy out of the earth, things like that, those work pretty much the same way as that. So that's what, when referring to COP, that's basically what is meant. When it comes to basic coils, for instance, if you run a motor and it has a coil, when you run that coil, normally based on how they're designed, you're usually, let's say for ease of measurement, you're using, say, 1 amp at 12 volts, which gives you 12 watts. And that's continuous power that you're running through a motor. And that's represented by the coil. Now what you're doing is, you get your 12 volts in, you run the motor, and you're connected back to the negative. Now wherever you pretty much measure, you're getting 1 amp. So you get 1 amp out, 1 amp back in. You're always getting that energy back in. Now what we talk about when we talk about short-circuited or a closed loop system is, this is a closed loop system. It is from the positive to the negative, or everything, all the work, everything that you're trying to do is closed loop. You've closed the loop around the circuit, you're getting whatever motor force or whatnot that you want out of the system here, and that's it, you've closed the loop. As soon as you start pulsing a system, where you pulse this motor in time and then use a diode to charge a capacitor or another battery or something like that, you've now broken the symmetry of this constant closed loop. You are now opening up the loop at a certain period of time, and whatever energy in amps, for instance, you got in there, say it was 1 second or half a second or whatever, you put a 1 amp pulse through there at 12 volts, it ran the motor for that 1 second, the field collapsed, and you regained that energy back. Now there are always losses in a system, so you may regain, say, 70 to 90% of what you put in that one pulse back into the capacitor there. Now, because you've broken up this symmetry, this closed loop in time, you need delta T. When you've broken it up in time and you're re-gauging and you're regaining that energy, you've put in 1 amp, 12 volts, you're getting back, say, 800 milliamps at 12 volts. You've actually only used up, say, 1/8 of the energy. Now, energy doesn't get used up, it doesn't get created. The losses are basically in heat, in sound, in light. They're basically, energy just gets transferred from one form to another. You can't create energy, you can't destroy energy. It just gets converted from one form to another. And you can control how you do those forms. You can control them in delta T in time. And so your COP, based on what you put in, can be greater than 1 because of all the regauging and all the collection mechanisms that you're using to recapture that energy. And then you can reuse that energy back into that system or a different system. Now you have positive and negative, and some people argue about the negative energy part. There's no such thing. Fair enough. You know, we call the spikes, the regauging, the negative part. You know, if you don't want to use those terms, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. The terms don't really matter. It's the effects of what happens in the circuits that matters. And you can regauge the systems so that when you're pulsing a system, when you're running AC, when you're running square waves, when you're running whatever system you want, and you're finding ways to recapture the energy that you used, because it doesn't get destroyed, it doesn't get used up. The battery uses it up because it tries to go back into a zero state based on how it was how it was made. In a lead acid battery, for instance, it will try and go back to zero when the plates are depleted. Usually not so much, because there's a potential difference between lead and the lead oxides that are being used in there and the chemicals that are being used in there. But this is a way of splitting the charge so that you can use it in a system. Now you can use that energy in time, delta T, and recapture it back. With losses, there's always losses, because heat, magnetic differentials, all sorts of things, you'll get losses. But you can recapture, say, 90% of that energy back. So now you've used 1 amp of energy to run a motor, to do whatever it is that you want it to do. And instead of dumping it back into the battery so that it's constantly short-circuited and working against itself, you have recaptured 90% of it to do some other work somewhere else. That's what regauging is. That's all that is. It's just, and then you can post this into another motor and recapture that energy. You can, Tesla talked about this all the time. Steinmetz talked about this all the time. All the great thinkers of who actually understood how electricity works knew that you could reuse energy, shuffle it around, do all sorts of things with a single pulse. You could cascade that pulse to do all sorts of work all the way down the line, because the energy doesn't get used up. It just changes form. So work, trying to calculate work as in power, is one aspect of the energy that you're using. The rest works differently. Everybody always tries to convert everything back to power, which is wrong. You can't do that. There are different ways of using energy that doesn't require power calculations. So COP greater than 1 is very basic. This is basically all it is. You use energy in time, you split it up, you regauge it, and you can pretty much have all the energy that you want. It's the simplest thing in the planet.